So let's just get into the thick of eBird here. So eBird, if you have not used it before, this is what you greet when you you log in to let me first go back and say a couple of other websites, show you a couple other websites that would be great to use in unison with eBird. The eBird Essentials course they say it takes about 3 hours to go through, and it will tell you a lot more detail than I'm going to have time to tell you today about eBird and what you should be doing when you have questions about entering things. So I highly recommend going to the eBird Essentials. I will rather than putting it in, I'll try to put in the chat the links that I have for these three websites so that you'll have it for later. eBird Essentials will get you started. This is a great one, the status and trends. This gives you heat maps. So if you want to look up hermit thrush and you look at the weekly range maps here, so this is going to give you the abundance. Go to static map over here. That's going to give you a nice flat map so you can see the hermit thrush range. But this is the coolest part. So I've clicked weekly, and then if you click play here, it's going to show you as checklists are entered throughout whatever year. You can designate some time frames, but it shows you their migration and where they're flying to and from. It's just a great little tool to be able to learn more. And there is lots of great information that tells you more about how to use this web page. But if you go to all, you'll see it used to just be a handful of species. Now it looks like they've got birds all around the world and this status and trends, which is fantastic information. Birdcast is another great one. If you don't know about it, this helps you know about where migration is predicted to be really heavy or light. It's based just during the migration season, nightly updates on based on weather information and whatnot. That's going to help. The Atlantic coast will be getting really hit hard, they'll estimate millions of birds flying over. So this is a great one as well to know about. But let's go back to eBird. So to submit a checklist, you click, submit, not explore. That's our next one. If you want to choose an area, being that I'm from the Tampa area, we'll stick with kind of focused on Hillsborough County. So Hillsborough, Florida. And then this pulls up, and these are all various, these are all of my personal spots that I've birded at in the area over the years. You can click on various areas to get dialed in. The red spots are hot spots. So let's just say you went birding at Fort DeSoto. This is probably this is part of the reason I'm going through this, honestly, is because of this and one other section. This observation type is one of the most important things to understand. So traveling is obviously, it seems self-explanatory, but obviously when you're traveling, eBird likes you to keep a checklist under about 5 miles. The quality or the statistical value of the data starts to decline after about 5 miles. So if you know you're going to be on a long, so you're doing a breeding bird survey or something like that, you're going to be on a long stretch. You want to stop every 5 miles and start a new checklist. One thing to remember with traveling is if you are doing a out and back. So if you are at any point traveling back on the same path, that you went out on, you need to adjust for that. If you have the eBird mobile app on your phone, it will keep your track for you, keep your mileage, which is great. But if you're going out one way and coming back the same way, say it was 2 miles out, you wouldn't put 4 miles, which is what the eBird app will try to say, because that's the total distance you traveled. You would need to adjust that to 2 miles to make it more scientific and robust data. Stationary, if you're sitting in one spot for a while, that's pretty self-explanatory. Historical would be if you, like it says, if birding was your primary purpose, but you don't remember the time or the amount of miles you traveled, you would use historical. Incidental would be just like you're driving down the road, you see a peregrine fly over and you want to catalog that. There are a bunch of other protocols that you can use if you're out with Mr. Jim banding. You would use the banding protocol because that designates that data in a different way. Or if you're out on a pelagic trip, you would use the pelagic protocol because that's designates the data in a different way, as well as like nocturnal flight calls. And then a bunch of these are other specific for specific organizations or other projects. So let's just say we're doing a stationary count today. We started at 1:11. We've done it for 1 hour. You want to say the number of your party size. And this is another good point. If you're doing this, you in the eBird app and on the web page, you can share your checklist with somebody. So if you're with a group of people, so when you're out birding with other young birders, have one person who volunteer to be the eBird list keeper, and then share that checklist with everybody. That day, the data that you had 20 people birding an area, seeing all those birds, whatever's on the checklist, is much more scientifically valid or not valid, more scientifically useful than 20 individual checklists. That skews the data in a different way. It doesn't necessarily mean the data is less important if you were all to submit your same checklist, but it's just weighted in a different way for scientific use. Oh, I always forget to do that. Let's see, it's after 1 p.m. today, so we should be good. All right, so the main things I want to hit on here, a couple of points. Count, putting your counts in. So there are two ways you can do eBird. You can put a count in, a numerical count of birds in, or just an X. An X is fine. It indicates to eBird that bird was observed. So it's essentially like putting a 1 in, because eBird doesn't know whether the X means you had 100 red-winged blackbirds or 1, right? So if you put an X in, you're just noting, okay, I observed the bird. It's more useful to put in 100 red-winged blackbirds, even if you're estimating. And one of the great things, if you go up here to help, there's a bunch of tutorials that will help you as well. That webpage I showed you, the eBird Essentials. This is a course that you can take over your, whatever time frame you have to put into it. The help function here has specific tutorials, and some of them are about counting, how to group birds, grouping birds by tens, or taking a flock of birds and, you count all of them and you think about 50 were, 50% were mallards and 20% were mottled ducks and 15%, whatever your totals are that would meet up to 100%. And then you would apportion that count appropriately for those percentages. So there's a number of different ways. So that's help, that tutorials and there will be extremely helpful for anybody who's just learning how to use eBird. So you put your counts in, and then at the end of it, well, let's actually take one step back. So as soon as, let's say you saw a bird it's not on your checklist. So say you had a Swainson's warbler today. You can use this jump to species up here to jump further down the page. But if you saw something that's not on it, you'll have to use add species, which will pop up this. It's a little bit different in the app, and I don't want to go through the whole app process, but so doing it on your computer is somewhat similar to the app. But you put a species in that's rare. The app requires you to submit documentation or some sort of text. I don't know that the website requires it for you to be able to complete your checklist. If you can add, as a reviewer, if you can add photos or good written documentation, that's super helpful, as opposed to Merlin identified it or something like that. Because the reviewer is just going to have to reach back out to you for more information. And don't be offended if a reviewer does reach out to you for a flagged species. They're just trying to make sure to keep the data and eBird as robust and valid as possible. There's certainly a lot of variables that go into eBird. Everybody's experiences are different and whatnot, but reviewers are there just to help eBird as well as help eBird users at the end of the day. You click complete, and then you would come down here. Pardon me, I have to move this. So now the last part is, are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? That doesn't mean are you sending a checklist of every single, complete with every single bird you saw out there, because there's going to be birds that you're not going to be able to identify because you just don't know them. You didn't get a good enough look. You didn't know what the song was. It was too far away to be able to tell what it was. And that's not what eBird's trying to get at. Are you purposely leaving anything off of the checklist is essentially how you have to think about this. Some species that are sensitive, eBird automatically hides those, but there are others you may feel like you would need to. It's on private property or something like that. Generally, the best thing to do then is just to wait a couple of weeks and then submit your checklist, because it takes about 2 weeks for all of the rare bird alerts to not pick that up. So you want to click yes, ideally, for that, and then click submit. So that's kind of going through and entering your data in a nutshell. What I really want to focus on is this tab up here, Explore. So Explore is really where I think that eBird has the potential to help birders, especially newer birders, really grow and understand a number of things: status, distribution. So here's this eBird Essentials down here. I was talking about Merlin Bird ID. If you don't have that app yet, it's definitely very useful. It's a lot of information on there. You can get a lot of the same information through the eBird app that you can the Merlin Bird app, but it's worth checking out. And then this is another great way to learn this photo and sound quiz. You can pick regions and the time of year, and it will create video or audio quizzes to help you learn. And this is a great way to be able to, if you're going on a trip somewhere, so say you're going somewhere like California and you want to know what birds you may be able to see there. I'll show you ways to find birds on eBird, and this is a way to learn what they look like and what they sound like in a more dynamic way than just looking at your field guide. Two things I want to touch on before we get into these four core parts of Explore is target species. So this is a way you can designate a region, and you can tell it if this will help go off of what you have on your life list and help send you notices for species that are reported that you haven't seen yet, that you haven't logged in the eBird on your eBird list yet. You can select your life list for it to select from, or your year list, month list, or even if you keep if you want to know what you saw on February 18th in previous years, and know what you didn't see or did see, you can do that with eBird through the target species. And then alerts. This is pretty much a rare bird alert, essentially. So the rare bird alert, you can put in a region. You can kind of subscribe, if you will, to multiple rare bird alerts, if I remember correctly. And then needs, that this is just the rare bird alert. If a Swainson's warbler, say it was reported at Fort DeSoto, you're gonna get an email or notification on your phone with that information. If you need, quote unquote, need that species for your list for either Florida or your month list or whatever, then you'll get a notification if you log their same region in for your needs. So a couple of great ways to learn more about what's being seen and more of a real time with eBird. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty here. So these four parts, in my opinion, are what's making the most, what makes eBird the most useful for new birders and traveling birders. I talk to people and they hadn't really even thought about the fact that you can use eBird to figure out where you're gonna, what you're gonna see when you're going somewhere. And just like with the sound quizzes, you can use this here, but this is specific to searching up a species. So you always have these photos. These are all photos that were submitted by people on their checklist. So when you submit a photo on your checklist, you basically are given eBird rights to use that in their website and various other platforms that they curate. But it's a great way to learn. A number of people, just like their eBird reviewers reviewing records, observations that get submitted, there are people who go and are reviewing these photos as well. A friend of mine the other day mentioned they've gone through like 22,000 photos for their county in northern New Jersey in just a few days, trying to people will help validate whether it's the species that's it's not a misidentified, I should say. But one of the greatest features of this is, let's look up that American goldfinch. American goldfinch. So here we see, various photos that are taken over time, but this is a great aspect. You can, and when Mr. Jim and I were much younger and using the Roger Torrey Peterson field guide, which I know it's still in print, but I don't know if they still do this. They used to have these sonograms of bird sounds in the field guide, and it's a great way to learn. So if you, this is an American goldfinch, and if we play this, so it's not as loud as I was hoping, but you can actually see these darker lines. That's what the bird sounds like, and you can actually, if you study them close enough. Let's see, what's another good species? Oh, it's a good one. Sparrow. Here we go. So if you study these enough, and there was a common yellowthroat there, a fainter one, you see how faint that is. Here comes that song sparrow again. So if you study these enough, it's a great way to be able to help yourself visualize bird sounds as well as, so learning them visually as well as seeing them. You connect those two aspects of your brain, and it can, at least some people, it can really help to solidify learning bird songs a little quicker. Species map. Well, let's jump over here to bar charts. I think bar charts is probably one of the most useful things to look at. Let's go to Florida counties, and then we'll pick our county. I'm going to pick Hillsborough County, and this will populate. Now you can see here the date range is January, all year, January to December, but from 1900 through 2023, which is useful information. I prefer to truncate that to about the last 10 years. So let's go to 2013. That's going to give you a better idea of the actual status, current status. So here's something interesting. We're talking about historical records. So look at this black belly whistling duck. So if you don't know what a bar chart is, it's basically giving you an abundance, a probability of what your likelihood is of encountering a species in proper habitat when you go out birding. The thicker the line, the thicker the bar chart at whatever time of year, the more abundant. Now that's a relative term, abundance. You have to consider that these bar charts are created by the number of checklists reported. So for how many, I don't know how many checklists, we could dial into the data and find out how many checklists were used to create this bar chart. But so say there's 100,000 checklists that are used to create this bar chart. The thickness of the bar is indicative of the number of times that species was reported in terms of the ratio of the number of checklists. Does that make sense to everybody? So just because black-bellied whistling duck is really thick all the way across doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to go out and see it all the time, but you have a higher probability of seeing a black-bellied whistling duck in proper habitat than you do a fulvous whistling duck, at least in Hillsborough County. But here's something interesting. When I was toying around with this a little while ago, we're talking about historical data. Let's go back to the ancient times. If you listen to my kids, of the 1980s, and we'll do 1988 to 1998. If you look at that, black-bellied whistling duck is gone. It's not even on. So this is a great way to, if you look at if you like looking at historical data, which is super useful to do. There's a series that a number of people who live and visit Cape May have very much enjoyed reading, called the Old Bird Studies in Cape May, or Bird Studies at Old Cape May. Whitmer Stone and I'm blanking on the other name. They Whitmer Stone wrote these books, and it's a lot of great historical data from like 100 years ago, 50 to 100 years ago, what Cape May was like. And it's a great way to learn how things change. So here we see that fulvous whistling duck, these gray spots here mean there's no checklist for that time frame. The other caveat you have to remember with doing this historical search like this is eBird wasn't around. So this is relying on people who have records from back then who have input that data. So it's a little skewed in that way. You have fewer checklists for the ratio to create these bar charts. So you may see some thick ones. Wood duck's really not a great example. I'm not really sure what, but so lesser scaup. So this is a good example. January here. There's lots of lesser scaup in Tampa Bay in January. Is it that there's none here? No, it's just there's of the checklist submitted, people just weren't birding and seeing lesser scaup at that time for whatever the reason may be. So some of it you have to use your critical thinking skills and determine what you're looking at, as opposed to just taking it at face value. Let's go back to, oh no, I did that wrong.
How far can you go back?
1900 is as far back as it goes. I haven't really done too much. So there's not really a lot of data that far back, people who have input some more historical data, like that bird studies at Old Cape May and things like that. You have some data from back then, but there's not enough really. It's interesting to see, but
so where do they get the sightings from?
Say that again, please.
Where do they get the sightings from?
For the historical stuff?
Yes.
Either people's personal records. I have some friends who are older than myself who, back when field note taking was a lot more prevalent in birding, you don't see very many people taking notes in the field so much anymore, or if they do, it's on their phone. So a lot of people, older people who have gone back through like I have a good friend, Doug Gill, his brother's actually Frank Gill, who wrote the ornithology textbook that colleges use. He has, I can't tell you how many notebooks full of bird records from his childhood. He started birding when he was very young. He's in his mid 70s now. So he's, probably got 60 years worth of written data that he could go in and put in if he so chose. So people like that. Other stuff, like I said, from documents like books and other research where people have agreed to help put it in. These are some news designations, these red stars here that eBird recently did a huge, I don't want to say purge, but switch on how they catalog exotic and invasive species. So these red means it's an exotic escapee, which it's okay to include some of these species in your birding. If you see, if you saw a domestic goose species and you wanted to put it in, that's certainly okay. But eBird wanted a way to be able to kind of keep those somewhat separate from species that are more regularly occurring native species. And then you have something like this gray that's indicates an exotic species that's naturalized. The Egyptian goose is a species that you're only going to find. Well, let's do this. Here's another great part about these bar charts. You can look at line graphs, and this is where I was talking about. You could dial in and see, abundance data, birds per hour, the high counts, totals. This isn't the greatest species to look at that way, but just like in the bar chart we saw before, there's this little flag with the hotspot icon. Click on that and it's going to bring you a map to show you where this species has been found within your region. We can certainly zoom out and see where other places are that this species has been seen. And if you're going by the American Birding Association rules, the only Egyptian geese that count right now for your list officially by American Birding Association rules are the ones that are down here in the Miami area. And there's one other spot, and I'm blanking on where that is. But let's get back to Hillsborough. So this is an interesting thing as well. So we've clicked this map and we're seeing what species, where this species has been recorded. These are all different checklists from people. Again, the one with the little flame on it means it's a hotspot. Hotspots are meant to be places that have public access that anybody can go to and bird. The empty ones, the smaller tab here with nothing in it, those are personal locations that people put. And you have the option to be able to hide your location when you're entering it. Again, like if you're on private property or something, you might want to do that. Otherwise, you'll get a little button here. But you'll notice there's orange ones and there's blue ones. The orange ones mean that that sighting is within the last 30 days. So if we click here on this spot, so Largo Central Park Nature Preserve on the 17th this year, Bobby Foley had three Egyptian geese, and this is another great feature. You can click on. You're supposed to be able to click on that. Nope. Maybe I have to click. Sorry. So the camera means that the photo is in. There's a photo as part of the checklist, but you click on the actual checklist link. You can see what they saw, and then you can also see the photos. And it's hard to tell from here, but that is most assuredly an Egyptian goose. You can see that dark spot on its breast. Get back to our bar charts here. So that all species in your area. And one nice thing is, I should have done this earlier. If you really wanted to, this is something when I first moved back to Florida, I lived in Cape May from 2005 to 2009, and then we moved down back home to the Lutz, Land O'Lakes area. And one of the first things I did was to go into the counties and print out bar charts so that I could have them at the time. eBird didn't have in 2009. I don't even think the iPhone was an event. It was right before the iPhone came out, I believe, maybe just after. So eBird didn't have any app yet for that, and it was difficult to navigate to the website. So I used this. So I did say Hillsborough, Hernando. If you hold down Command or Control, Command for Apple products, Control for Windows products. And then where's Pinellas? There it is. So you can actually do 3 or more. I think you can do up to 15 counties at once. So this is all 3 counties data, which is a great way to learn a region that you may be spending a good amount of time in. And let's go down. I like to go back and let's look at these lesser scaup, because there are lots of lesser scaup that will visit in the winter. So you can see here the frequency. If you look at especially if you like looking at grass and things, there's lots of birds in January. Probably lots of birders out. This is very much probably, if you look at this, it kind of coincides with when Space Coast Festival, and then I forget what the other festival is. It's in Central Florida, around the Apopka area. So there's lots of birders coming down to visit. So that's one possible reason that this is so high, as well as there's just lots of birds around. And then obviously there's nothing. And we see the migration of these birds in the area in a line graph. I like high counts in particular. So here in early January, we've got 36,000 as a high count. And then here right around Christmas count time, our high count is 80,000. And now granted, again, that's just taking into consideration those 3 county regions. And the average count. And when you're entering your checklist in eBird, if you'll get flagged for if it's a rare bird, you also get flagged if it's a high count. I can't say you would ever get flagged for a low count, although you can put a 0 into eBird if you're going, like particularly if it was a staked out rare bird and say there was a green-tailed towhee somewhere and you went to see it, but it didn't show up, you could put 0 down for your time there, indicating you were there, but it did not show up. If you get flagged for a high count, so say you were, this is a culmination of all checklists in terms of this 80,000. It could be one person reported 80,000, or it could be multiple checklists reported a total of 80,000. But if you get flagged for that high count, don't be afraid to, you should not dial back and say, okay, well, maybe it was only 60,000. And some people, I've talked to some people and they said, well, and it would still say I had to verify the sighting. So they dialed back to like 40,000 and then eBird didn't make them say that it was a verified sighting. That does nobody any good. You're not reporting what you actually saw or what you actually counted. And you just, shorted eBird 40,000, lesser scops, so to speak. It'd be better to go ahead and submit it and then let the reviewer, email you if they do. Sometimes these filters that eBird reviewers are working on need to be updated frequently. eBird has yet to get it automated in a way that it takes into consideration the checklist submitted and automatically fluctuates filters as needed. So it's still done by people saying, yeah, I think that you could see this many, of this species on a day's birding in this area. And sometimes those filters need to be updated, and it helps reviewers to know that it needs to be updated, as well as it's just you don't want to shortchange yourself in that way. So let's go back to all right. So you can see that if you go through, another really great thing to look at is to, just to know when a species is going to be around. Yes, many people already know the general, you learn very quickly as a birder. Well, this is an interesting, I haven't seen this red one with a little, exotic provisional. I wonder what that means. Anyway, sorry. People know warblers are coming through. Well, down there in Florida, it's late March through the middle of April is really kind of the peak time frame. Where we are here, it's mid-April through the first couple weeks in May. A little bit further north, it's a couple weeks later. Your parulers you're talking about singing down there. We'll start to see parulers up here in a couple of weeks. It'll take them mid-March, I guess, is when we really start to expect to see them coming up in more numbers. So you can see that data here. You see the birds that are here all year long, and then get down to warblers. Pardon me, because they've changed the taxonomic order so much. So hooded warbler. This is a very common migrant. Here's a one-off. One or more birds, not very many birds were reported on a checklist around this time of year. So something to keep in mind with this bar charts, each month is divided into 4 parts, 4 weeks in a month, right? It's not, you can't think of it on like a Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday type of week. It's, the first 7 days, the second 7 days, essentially is how that works. So around this time of the year, at some point, a hooded warbler was seen somewhere in one of these 3 counties and reported, but you don't really expect to be able to go out and have a good chance of seeing a hooded warbler until the end of March. And through pretty much the 3rd week in April, you have a pretty good chance in the right habitat. So you go to Dunedin Hammock, you're going to have a good chance to see a hooded warbler there, or Fort DeSoto, somewhere like that. Obviously, they don't nest there during the summer, although there's this one interesting record here in early July. But one thing a lot of people don't realize about warblers is about birds in general is just how short their nesting season really is. Birds that have arrived on territory back here in March, those are probably the birds that you'll be seeing passing back through in beginning of late July, beginning of August, or birds that have had more than one nest attempt failure, and they decide to it's too late and I need to get moving back south. The best time to see a hooded warbler in one of those 3 counties is going to be in the first 2 weeks of September, versus Parula, which is year round, but you can see they're more prevalent at these times of year, right? Any questions about bar charts as we go on? There's so much data in eBird. You could spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours learning all sorts of stuff. All right. So bar charts, I showed you the map that you could click on. That's essentially taking you over here to this species map. And you have the ability to, you can change your your view of the map here however you wish. But you can select a species and you can select your date ranges, just like you can with the bar charts. So hooded warbler, hooded warbler, but instead of year round, we don't want to see where it is year round. Oh, I hit the wrong button there. Let's just see fall migration. So August through November. And the same thing with our years. We truncate it, but we only want to see like the last 3 years for data. Now, this is not based on region. This is based on all data in eBird. So this is going to give you, this is a great way to learn the actual distribution of these species. So you can see hooded warbler, the frequency here is the darker, the darker colors means they're more abundant. You're more likely to see them. Oh, sorry, wrong way. The lighter areas. Now that doesn't mean that you have a million birds that are seen in this area, only 100 birds. It's somewhat relative, but this is kind of the core of their range. There's a lot of nesting going on. So you would expect to see more of those birds here. If you dial in a little further, let's go back down to Florida though. Oh, we went too far. So, come on, computer. So we can see where the heavier concentration of fall migrants in Florida is. Let's not leave out the northern part of the state. So, and some of this is, is weighted a little more for areas that are birded more. Not as many people live in this part of the state, so you can see there's very little data here. And this is, I will encourage everybody to go onto eBird and try to find areas that don't have records. When I lived, when we moved back in 2009, there's an area not too far away from Learning Gate Community School in North Tampa called Violet Curry Preserve. It's a great little spot. And I made it my local patch, and I had the luxury of being able to bird for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes every morning before I went into work. And it was great, all the things I found. It's more of an urban park. So it was great. It was a spot that didn't have a lot of data, and I was able to, add a lot of data to eBird for that. And I was looking, just doing some research for this, and somebody had a snail kite there not like just a couple of years ago. I would have never thought. It's got the man-made pond in the middle. Never would have thought a snail kite would happen there, but lo and behold, somebody was there, right place at the right time. So you can drill further down, and then as you get closer, you'll have here. Let's do this. This will be a fun one, because this is a bird that's coming back very soon, if not already back. Swallowtail kite. So no sightings recorded on eBird in the Tampa area yet. This is a species. I don't know if y'all are going to have Gina. Did you have Gina or Ken already talk about swallowtail kites, if I remember correctly? The company I work for, Cellular Tracking, we make the trackers that they use to put on these swallowtail kites, so they can keep track of their where they are. And these swallowtail kites are flying down along in here, and they're wintering in South America, and then they work their way back up. So you get a much more a better world view of where a lot of these birds are going and what they're doing. Some of these birds are some of these points down here in South America are resident birds that are there year round. Some of the migrants that are being tracked. But I thought for sure we'd see January or February 14th, Valentine's Day, is often the general day that they end up showing up at Corkscrew Swamp. I know. Let's see if there's any down there.
Jason, you got to change your date. You're in August, November. Oh,
that's why. Thank you very much. Let's go back to year round. I wasn't thinking about that. See. The only thing I don't like about this map is you have to dial in pretty far before it starts to show you the hotspot. Come on now. The hotspot icons. There we go. Okay, so now there are a few being seen. That's few so there's a few working their way up. Yeah, okay, good. So obviously you can see tons of sightings over the course of time. This is all years, so we're going back to 1900, but we have a couple of spots here. Here's one at a hot spot. Oh, Brooker Creek Preserve. Okay, great spot in a bird. And yeah, so on the 16th, somebody has one that they saw. So, and again, just to touch on this again, a real nice thing to look at here is you can see all the species that were reported, but then there's that swallowtail kite, and they are saying this is the notes they entered. I believe there's a way to tell if these were done by the computer or mobile, but here's all their lists. Photos that people put with their list. And then one of the last parts that I wanted to make sure and point out is all of this is very helpful to get to know the birds in your area, in your own state, but also, like I said, when you are traveling, and explore hotspots is really, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that. So say you're going to come up here to Cape May, you can see the color designation here is more than 600 species observed in hotspots. Well, you're going to find that mostly here in Colombia, Venezuela, Bolivia, and some of those areas, Panama, the areas where they actually have 600 species in a very small area. But definitely get up into the 500s in some other areas. So here we are in Cape May, New Jersey. So we can, I'm going to take a trip up to Cape May, where do I want to go birding? This helps helps you to know not only what birds were seen there, because you can click on so I was talking about Cape Island earlier. You can see this canal here. So this is Cape Island. When we were doing our big days, this was the only area we birded, and we were trying to get over 100 species in a day. And we hit places like Higbee Beach Wildlife Management Area and the Cape May Point State Park. So this is where the famed Cape May Hawk Watch takes place. And you can see that there are multiple hotspots in the area. So the Hawk Watch itself is a hotspot. Cape May Point State Park is a hotspot. And the nice thing about this is when you pick a hotspot to look at, it tells you the total number of species, the total number of checklists for that area. You can jump straight to some of those other charts that I was showing you earlier. You can view details about the specific location. Why isn't that working? All right. Oh, there we go. Finally. And it's going to show you the most recent date that things were seen. So especially as you get closer to the time you may want to go somewhere, you can look for a species on the list. There are ways to be able to search for things as well. This is a great resource for being able to figure out where, what you're going to see. Why did it do that? What you're going to see when you go birding somewhere. And it's one of the best parts, as I was trying to get to a second ago, is this color over here in the legend helps you know, okay, well, these lots of species have been seen down here in the southern part. There are areas where there aren't as much. It doesn't mean they're not as birdy. It's just not birded quite as much. Along the bay shore, the Delaware Bay Shore is where a lot of the shorebird phenomenon happens. You're going to see some higher numbers there as well. But again, remember, it's the total number of species seen as opposed to the total number of checklists or the density of birds. And they even have, these are real fun points to look at. You have these spots here. This is the Cape May Lewis ferry that goes from Cape May to Lewis. And some people eBirded that, or that I guess is a hotspot. A lot of people eBird that. 169 species have been seen just from the Cape May Lewis ferry in New Jersey waters. We have to make sure and keep in mind this is going to be the Cape May Lewis ferry in Delaware waters. So it's tough to if you're birding it and you don't know where the line the state line is. It's tough to make your checklist one side or the other, but. There any questions so far? No, really? Come on, there's got to be questions. All right. Jonathan, I see you're planning to. Does that mean you're planning to visit the U.S. this summer? I'm assuming, or do you have a specific area that you're looking to visit? We can look it up real quick and take a look at where you're.
I'm not sure if he is still in.
He's
Okay.
not in anymore.
Okay. Well, okay. Somebody, let's just do something real fun here, quick. Somebody, give me a location that you're maybe hoping to go visit. Could be anywhere, really anywhere in the world, as you see.
Yellowstone National Park.
Did you say Yellowstone?
Yes.
All right. There we go, Yellowstone. All right, so Yellowstone National Park. Unsurprisingly, most of the birding hotspots are along the roads, which is generally the hotspot marker is put kind of at a trailhead. I don't know anything about Yellowstone. I've never been there before. So let's just pick one spot real quick to look at before we finish up. Let's see, we want something let's go with right here, this yellow one. So West Thumb Geyser Basin. What can we expect to see? Let's change this to, let's see, let's pretend we're going very soon. Okay, let's just do all years then. It's a very small list in this location in February, which you might expect. But this, this is a great way to be able to know, okay, so if I stop at this spot, I've never seen a red crossbill before. There was 10 here very recently. Something I didn't point out as well is that you can not only do you have the photos and audio that I showed you earlier, but you can click on the actual bird name and it takes you to information. It'll take you to range maps, to specific information. This is all of eBird for I believe it, yeah, just for this area. It depends on where you click on the bird name as to what it shows you. If I was in the bar charts, it would show me more, it kind of dials into your region, but you can adjust things to see it in a more broad scale. I have never made any observations at Yellowstone, so I don't have anything here, but there have been 92 eBird observations of red crossbill. You can see the relative abundance on our bar chart here. You can see photos, and this is also a great way to learn. For those who don't know, red crossbill has they've recently split it into some, I think it's like 7 or so species, individual species. They all look pretty much exactly alike. You have to tell them mostly by their call, the differences in their call. And so you have type 5 here if you wanted to listen to it, type 2 if you wanted to listen to it. So just a plethora of data with eBird to help learn more of your, more habitat, or not habitat, distribution and where birds are, across the world. That's something I didn't really delve much into, but if eBird was very US centric when it started, of course, but it has grown into a database that really covers the entire world. Let's take for one last thing here, let's take osprey. If you look at osprey are pan-global. They're found on every continent except for Antarctica. And here you can see all the records of osprey around the world, which is really cool. It's a great way to learn not only where birds, especially if you're looking at a known migrant. It's a great way to learn. We tend to think of birds in the US as our birds. That hooded warbler, we tend to think, but the hooded warblers are really only in the US for 4 or 5 months out of the year, and the rest of the time they are either migrating or in their wintering habitat down in Central and South America. So it's a great way to get a much broader global view of bird life and understand that we need conservation efforts here on our own property, as well as where they spend most of their time often. Any other